Hello everyone and welcome back to the third season of Color Spotlight. I know it's been a hot minute since our first episode of the season, so thank you for bearing with me as it took me way too long to get this video to you. For those of you who are finding my channel for the first time, Color Spotlight is a series in which I explore watercolor pigments, how they interact with other colors, and demonstrate using them in an actual painting. Today we're going to be taking a look at a very heavily requested color, transparent Pyrrole orange. P071 is a light, fast, staining, very intensely colored pigment that ranges from a middle orange to almost red in hue. Schmincke was the first watercolor company to offer this color, but it can now be found in many other brands such as Daniel Smith and Core, and I believe more recently it's also been added to Rembrandt, Lucas, and My Merry Blue, though I haven't tried those last three myself. This orange is a bit more mellow than its abrasive cousin P073 and has more depth than the rather popular Halloween-looking orange made from P062. If you've been around the channel for a while, you may have heard me sing this color's praises before, especially Daniel Smith's version that was much deeper and darker than the other brands that I've tried. Nearly red in hue, this beautiful color was amazing for mixing the perfect blacks when combined with phthalo blue and has been a staple on my palette for many years. However, starting a year or so back, I had several viewers and even other artists say that they weren't having much luck neutralizing this color like I seem to in my videos. I was rather confused, but recently picked up a new tube to see what all the fuss was about, and sadly, I can confirm that what was once a very unique version of this color is no more. Daniel Smith seems to be using a different version now of this pigment that falls more closely in line to the other options available on the market. I haven't spoken with them about this to confirm, so please don't take what I say next to be fact. But if I had to take an educated guess, my thought would be that they had a bulk supply of this original color that I was used to seeing, and once they ran out, they switched over to a new supply that lies somewhere closer to the norm. It is, however, still on the richer end of the spectrum when compared to the other two samples that I have, so that's something at least. Next up is the original Schmincke's transparent orange. This hue is brighter and closer to a middle orange when compared to either of Daniel Smith's options and has a translucent glow about it. It glazes nicely and has a very even dispersion, but I do want to just kind of add in here that there's kind of this intangible quality about it that I just don't love painting with, and I'm not sure why, but wanted to go ahead and mention it. The last swatch is a bit more common here in the US, and that is Core's version of P071, which is by far the brightest version of orange in the bunch. It has the cleanest glazes and an intensity that cannot be matched by the other colors. However, given how different it is when compared to my original love for Daniel Smith's former version, it is a far cry from the color that I used to speak so fondly of. Approaching the color mixing section of this video was a bit odd. I didn't want to use my original version of Daniel Smith since it's not something you all would be able to buy if you did like the mixes. I didn't love the way that Schmincke's version mixed in the first place, and I straight up forgot that I had a tube of Daniel Smith's newer version at the time. So rather than go with a middle ground like I usually try to do for these videos and give you a broader sense of what this pigment is capable of, I did decide to go with Core's brighter version, with the thought being that it is still a relatively popular color available in their lovely high chroma set, and I haven't personally had a chance to play around with it much yet, so I thought it would be fun. I think we can all gather that this color would make electric oranges if it were mixed with a bright or warm yellow, so I decided to go with something a little bit different for our first pairing and instead used PY53. This color is commonly called nickel titanate yellow, and it is a very muted, opaque yellow. This duo together creates a range of really happy, peachy yellows and oranges. Next up, I chose to use PR264 Pyrrole Red Deep, and there isn't a ton of versatility here outside of the deep red oranges that you'd expect. However, this pairing does create a range of rosy and peachy oranges as well as muted corals. Oh, and just as a reminder, I wanted to let you know if you're new to this series, I do have another video on my channel that shows you how to make these swatch strips, which were inspired by Jane Blundell's work. So if you want to see those, I'll put a link up in the iCard above. Then we have what is possibly my favorite pairing of the bunch, mostly because of how unexpected it was. When mixing with manganese violet made from PV16, this orange creates a delightful range of warm browns, dusty pinks, and muted granulating purples. I really love the hues that I was able to find here and hope to be able to use them in a future project. Following the subtly granulating violet, I wanted to show you a stronger, darker purple as well. Transparent Pyrrole orange with dioxazine violet makes for some stunningly rich, non-granulating browns and darker, dusky purples. I really love this pairing, and if you're someone who loves dioxazine violet, which does also come in the high chroma set from Core, I think that adding this orange to your palette will give you a lot of versatility that you might not have been expecting. I also used two different blues in this section of the video, starting with ultramarine. This warmer granulating blue makes for some hues reminiscent of colors like burnt umber and Payne's gray. You won't be able to entirely neutralize the two since there isn't really enough yellow in play, but it does still make for some useful colors. And finally, we have to see what this color looks like with that phthalo blue, since my original favorite combo with the Daniel Smith version made delicious inky blacks with this pairing. Sadly though, we're not going to see that here since we would need more red in the mixture to do so, but we do still get some lovely options. This mixture creates burnt and raw umber-like colors, greenish sepias, and even dark muted turquoises. They're really, really beautiful as long as you're not expecting to be able to get black from them. To finish off this page, we're going to do our usual pigment demonstrations, and for this entire page up to this point, I used Core's Transparent Pyrrole Orange. However, as you can see with the dispersion test and might know from the reputation, Core's colors have a tendency to be a little bit wacky in wet washes. For that reason, I also wanted to show you a side-by-side of what the more typical dispersion looks like when using Schmincke's transparent orange version. As we've discussed earlier, this color glazes very well given its transparent nature. It lifts reasonably well for being as staining as it is, but don't expect to get back to the white of the paper, and it softens off well enough, but be sure to watch for back runs if you add a lot of water. For the demo painting, I wanted to paint a brightly colored animal that would show off this orange in a way that paid respect to the color itself, while still being something that I could appreciate. Oh yeah, for those of you guys who are new here, I'm not a fan of bright oranges. I've never liked them, and it's just kind of a thing. But at the same time, I was running my Patreon community challenge for September, which happened to be focused on parrots, and I had a patron who requested that I paint sun conures for one of our real-time tutorials. All of the stars seem to be aligned and pointing me straight to these little cuties. If you've watched all of the Color Spotlight episodes as well, you might also be facing a case of deja vu, because I did actually paint sun conures for another video when we looked at PY3. Like really early on, and don't go back and watch it, or if you do, make sure you come back here to this one and see how far I've come, because it was a pretty big yikes as far as proportions go. Anywho, in that video, I used a reference picture that focuses on the yellows and greens of the species' head and wings, with the orange kind of facing away from the viewer. But this time around, I chose a reference that focused on their faces and bellies to really let that orange shine through. In this painting, I mostly used Hansa Yellow Light, Indian Yellow, and Transparent Pyrrole Orange for majority of the bird's base coloration. Throughout these first layers of the painting, you might notice me kind of coaxing the paint into smoother washes, which has more to do with the fact that I'm using Core watercolors than the pigments themselves, since, as I mentioned before, Core is a bit of a wild child. I let my first wash be an exploration of wet into wet, laying down a strong foundation for our birds, which was later followed up by more controlled washes and detail. I used touches of Pyrrole Red Light for the cheeks, Phthalo Blue, Phthalo Turquoise, and Sap Green for the wings, and Payne's Gray for areas like the bird's beak and feet. As nearly always, I finished off the painting with some white gouache for the highlights and to create a more convincing texture on the feet themselves. Since there are two birds in this painting, I will try not to show you too much redundant footage of painting the same areas twice unless they're particularly interesting, but I will let this video kind of play out so you can watch it come together. If you'd like to see this painting in more detail, I have painted the bird on the left as a real-time Patreon tutorial. On Patreon, you'll get to paint along with me, as well as see the entire backlog of tutorials that I have available over there. The original has already sold, thank you Pat, but if you would like to buy prints, you can pre-order them over in my Etsy shop. I do hope that you enjoyed this new episode of the Color Spotlight series, and thank you so much for your patience, as I know it took me way too long to get this to you. Let us know in the comments below if you enjoy using this color, and if so, what your favorite applications are for it. And also let me know that if you were a big fan of the old Daniel Smith version, if you found a good replacement for it. I'm sure that if I scour long and hard enough, I can find a warm red that would be a good dupe, but I really would love to hear if you have any tried and true favorites. As always, thank you for watching, liking, and commenting, and if you'd like to see more in this series as well as other watercolor content, be sure to subscribe to the channel. And I haven't confirmed this, but I did hear some other content creators talking about a reset with the notification bell, so if that is something you're interested in, make sure to give that bell a ring too so that you can be notified when new videos come out. A special thanks to my incredible patrons for all of their patience and support and for helping to relaunch this very series. And until next time, my friends, happy painting!